Bullshit.
The No BS Marketing Show is brought to you by Laramore's men's and women's designer clothing. Free shipping, free returns. Shop men's and women's designer clothing, shoes, accessories, jewelry, and more online at laramores.com or in store downtown Pittsburgh. It is a special episode of the No BS Marketing Show. Hard to believe, number 200, episode 200. We've been at this since August of 2 years ago, so we're actually up to about 27 months of doing the No BS Marketing Show. We've had all kinds of help, and we're going to talk to some of those people that help build the show, run the show, live the show. Pretty much everyone at Mass Solutions has played a role, but some of them have been there from before the show started, and we'll have a couple of those here today. And the first one goes way back to prior to episode 1, brainstorming about it. But then back in episode 1, I asked Mike Mastovich, my brother, to be on the show for a bunch of reasons. First, he's been with Mass Solutions for about 10 years, doing all kinds of great messaging and PR, storytelling, strategy, brainstorming. He's been through all kinds of stuff as the company has grown. And even though he's been working with the company for those 10 years, he knew about the company 15 years ago when I decided to start it on the side while I was a chief communications officer at Duquesne University. So he's been pretty much with Mass Solutions for 15 years, and he's been my brother my whole life. He's a Hall of Fame writer and a PR guru. He understands Mass Solutions. He understands messaging. He's one of the few people that I think actually understands me, and he's a no BSer. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Number 200, it's kind of gets nostalgic here. It reminds me back when we were teenagers collecting comic books, how excited we were to get issue number 100 or 200 or Spider-Man 300. So here we are at number 200 of the podcast.
Exactly. Mike and I were big comic book guys, so much so that Mike Minot, who's also a big part of the Mass Solutions team as a creative genius, the three of us wrote and produced our own comic books. And I was already serving in that director role back then because I couldn't draw for shit. And both Mike Maz and Mike Minot were really creative on the drawing standpoint. So I was already a director there trying to tell them what was in my head. And we'd get into arguments. And as a 10-year-old, I'd say, no, that's not how I see it. And they would look at me like, dude, we don't have what's in your head. So I was already doing the marketing company model with Mike Minot, our next door neighbor, and Mike Maz from way back then. We've always also been into sports, and you've made a career out of a sports writer, a Hall of Fame sports writer. But way back in the early days, we also both did stringer work for newspapers in college, which you then made it a profession. We also both did some radio, some TV on sports. So it's been a fun run for the two of us, getting involved and getting our creative juices flowing. Let's go way back, Mike, to 2+ years ago. Talk to me in your perspective about the podcast from when you first heard I was going to do the No BS Marketing Show. When you first heard I was going to do a podcast, did you even know what they were? To when you learned you were going to be the first guest on that first show. Just walk back and tell the audience your perspective as an objective third party when you heard all this stuff.
Sure. Yeah. In 2015, August, I was familiar with podcasts through the Tribune Democrat. Sean Curtis, the sports editor, had a podcast. I remember when he bought the big microphone. It looks exactly like yours. And he brought it into work one day and said, this is what we're going to use for podcasts. And prior to that, Sean and I had teamed up on a thing. If you could find it still on YouTube, I see some wild hairstyles we used to have about 6-7 years ago. And it was called the TD Club, which played on the Tribune Democrat plus Touchdown, and it was during high school football season. So that was kind of a podcast, but a little longer than a podcast. It was video. So I was familiar with the concept. And when you said that you were going to introduce the No BS podcast, I thought, wow, that's a great idea, a great way to utilize your skills and your communication and conversational. You have that knack of telling a story or making people laugh, and but still making a very serious point, whether you used humor or analyzing something. So I thought, boy, this is going to be great for Dave. And sure enough, here we are 200 episodes later, it's evolved from 2 years ago. And of course, when you said I'd be the first guest, I was a little nervous. I was experienced that podcast from, as I said, doing the ones with Sean on baseball, hockey, and football, and the TD Club. But at the same time, you're always, like you said, you always try to get me out of my comfort zone. And that was a little bit out of the comfort zone, but not quite, because I knew I was talking to you, so that made me feel a little better. And I listened to the podcast recently just to kind of refresh on it, and it still holds up 2 years later.
I agree. That first one was fun because it was us, and it really did. You made a great point. It plays to something that why I wanted to do podcasts so much was from a very early age. Teenager, started doing on-air work at multiple radio stations and started my own DJing business. And I remember when I was doing sports on the radio, I would bring you, when you were doing sports for the newspaper, I'd bring you on the air, and you were a natural at it. And I remember the first time they put you on for the Chiefs on WJAC TV, I remember thinking, man, he just handles this so well. So I knew having you as the first guest was going to be awesome. And I agree with you. I knew this was going to play off of something that I perceive as a strength, in that I really enjoy interviewing people. I really enjoy asking people about their journey and what they do. And so from the beginning, when I went through a couple of consulting programs on podcasts, and one of them was with John Lee Dumas, who has Entrepreneur on Fire, and he's turned that into a multi-million-dollar podcast, one of the top ones in the country. And the John Dumas program that I went through said you should very quickly decide, do you want it to be a guest-focused podcast, or do you want it to be a host-focused podcast? And I quickly made the decision that I wanted it to be a guest-focused podcast. And once I decided that, it was all about deciding on the template of questions that I would generally ask. And I knew you'd be the first guest, so I was excited to get you on.
Yeah, definitely. It worked out. I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but I thought the format was pretty cool too, because you always had the the rant and the bullseye section, and just those were neat little tidbits that led into what was coming into the show. And then also, those things served as perfect, getting more bang for your buck. They serve as perfect blogs for the Mass Solutions website. So it's always neat. You kind of give that little rant or bullseye, makes the guest listens into it and then feels comfortable, and then also adds a little perspective to the show. So I always thought that worked out pretty well too.
I agree. I've found that the guests often interject about the Cut the Bullshit rant, which starts episode 1, and then the Hit the Bullseye targeting little brief segment that starts episode 2. It's interesting because the guests will jump in and start commenting about the rant or the bullseye, and that just totally seems to relax them. And that's my goal, is I want the guests to feel comfortable so it can be conversational. And what I've heard from the guests, multiple guests, dozens of guests have said, that's the most comfortable I've been on the air. That's the most I've had the chance to tell my story on the air. And that's flattering to me, because that's really the goal. The goal is whoever's on there tells their journey, tells their story. I interject and follow up with questions where I think it could be interesting to the listener. And it really does seem to get the guests comfortable.
Yeah, without a doubt. I remember the first one we did, you talked about do-it-yourself marketing, and we kind of, related that even to journalism, which is kind of, you wouldn't think that is possible, but we talked about stringers and, freelance writers, stringers, and things like that. And I just remember it was pretty cool. So
tell me a little bit more about what you've liked from some of those rants or bullseyes. Are there any that stick out in particular that you like and you've applied, or that maybe you've talked to coworkers about?
I'll tell you what, there are so many different ones. And I go back to that first one, the do-it-yourself marketing. It always made me, laugh, because I applied it to journalism, as we talked about stories, but also that I think about myself as do it yourself in the home. And, just recently I had an issue with some plumbing, and, I took my shot at it, and I was looking at my water bill today, and it basically doubled. So there's an example in home life. I think everybody can apply that to whatever they do. And then as a professional, I think about, you have to hire freelance writers to do something you'd like to do. And that helps you get things covered. But at the same time, there's always, you're thinking, boy, I wish this would have been done this way or that way. But, that's just how it goes. There's so many different examples. And I also enjoyed, when Chip Minnemeyer, the sports editor, was on there. I like you go into all kinds of different genres or different areas of business. I mean, and I can relate to when Chip was on there, and just so many people I've worked with. The shows have just had Lorianne Poutier and Mike Gaddy, our cohort. Just there's so many different things that are there to listen and learn on, I guess.
The do-it-yourself cut the BS rant you're talking about applies to how people often think they can try to do things themselves internally as if that makes them more valuable. And what I learned, and one of the biggest trajectories of my career, was when I was fortunate to be with UPMC when the health system was growing and they were building a health insurance plan and a sports marketing program. And what I learned there was that throughout my career, I had already done this, where when I felt I wasn't the expert in my internal team, whether that was 10 people or 100 people, depending on the size of the company that I led a team, I realized early on in my career that you had to go out and find outside experts to do certain things. So I remember when I was at UPMC, I was getting a lot of stuff done through my team. And that team was internal and external people. And I remember one other VP said, yeah, all you do is you just go and find some outside firm to get that done. And I looked at them, because there was a him and a her, and I said, well, if I do that on time and on budget, so I came into the year and I built my budget, and my budget included some use of external resources. If I built that into the budget and I did it on time and on budget, who cares who did it? And that's my point. Some people think that the do-it-yourself way makes them more secure in the company and makes them more valuable, and that if someone does an external outside freelancer, or they hire a marketing firm to help coach them up and help them execute tactically where they're struggling, they think that's a sign of weakness, when in reality, it's a sign of strength. And that's what that rant was about, that do-it-yourself rant that you referenced in episode 1, is that it really comes down to, it's not a weakness, it's the opposite. It's a strength. If you have the leadership abilities to understand outside resources, be able to know which ones are good, which ones cost the right amount, and to be able to lead those quirky outside people. Because when you don't own them, when they're not an employee, and I'm jokingly saying own them, when they're not an employee, that means they are harder to manage. So I would tell these other VPs that I would say it's harder to manage an outside firm, because they are an outside freelancer, an outside firm, because they aren't beholden to you. And while they want you as a client, they do it their way. So that takes even more leadership. So that's where I was coming from, that do-it-yourself rant. And you mentioned when we had guests like Lorianne Poutier, the president of IntegraCare Corporation, who you've had a great opportunity to work with. You mentioned Chip Minnemeyer. That is one of my favorite ones, is when Chip Minnemeyer of the Tribune Democrat, the editor, was on, and he walked through a lot of the philosophies of where newspapers are. And we both brainstormed about where newspapers have to go to try to survive and thrive in the internet era. A lot of great guests. We've had some recent ones tied to the city of Pittsburgh. I mentioned Rodna Oliphant, the chief executive officer of Leadership Pittsburgh. We've had a couple of dignitaries, people that were on reality shows. It's been a big cross section of guests, and it's really made the show something special.
Without a doubt. I mean, you could go through that through the whole gallery and just pick your topic you want, or what kind of subject you want to explore, because there's just so many people with so many diverse backgrounds, and it's just like a wealth of information. You could sit there for hours and just pick which ones you want to hear. Like I said, I ran into someone who was binge listening as well. He was walking through the city of Pittsburgh, and he had headphones in, earbuds in, and he stopped me, waved, and said, and I know them, and he stopped me and said, guess what I'm listening to? And he held it up, and I could hear the show, and he said, I'm up to episode 132, and he was binge listening as well. And as you said, you can get a lot of value from it. So that's my hope, is that various audience can get a lot of value. Anything that you notice that has changed since the show began? Because as you said, episode 1 holds up pretty well, but I kind of chuckle, as John Dumas said you would, when you do episodes 1 through 20, I hear them and I say, boy, we've come at least I feel much more comfortable. Hopefully it's come a long way. Yeah, it's definitely, some of the things that haven't changed that you got to love is the little intro. I don't know. I guess we never really talked that. It's probably something you and Gaddy came up with, the little trumpet and, the BS. Yeah, that thing there. It's just like, boom, what you're in for when you hear that at the beginning. So that's a great calling card there. So I love how that stayed the same. As you said, the presentation, it just flows, and you've got the system down. We don't want to sound like we're just here complimenting each other, but it truly is, a flowing, entertaining, but informational presentation.
We also, from time to time, mix it up with some that I do just myself when I feel I have a topic that warrants a 15, 20-minute conversation. And we have a whole team of people that give ideas. And a couple of the ideas that 2 or 3 people came up with, one is they'd like to see me also have some segments that are kind of like your marketing 201, like, and not so much marketing 101, entry-level marketing, but like just above the surface of that entry-level marketing, where it's maybe 8, 10, 15 minutes about a topic, and it's a bit of a deep dive into a topic. And so continually incorporate those in with guests, and then continually do some of them that are more on the road. So I have done some on the road whenever I was at a conference and had the chance to interview some people, interview 5, 6 people for a minute each. We've had requests for that as well, both internally and externally. So what we're looking to do going into year 3 and beyond episode 200 is incorporate that deep dive, drill down into some topics, almost like a webinar type thing where we're giving you a topic and breaking through how to get better at that topic. So that could be a marketing professional, could be an entry-level person, could be a mid-level manager, could be an entrepreneur or CEO who wants to better understand segments of marketing, pieces of marketing. Second piece is we're going to try to continue and maybe even expand the remote on the road pieces of it, where we interview multiple people, or I do the show when I'm on site somewhere. And then of course you want to continue to have a inventory of guests. So anybody out there listening that wants to recommend a guest, let us know. We are going to do more of them by Skype. We had so many guests that were within an hour of the office and the studio that the first, probably 100, 150 episodes were predominantly done in the studio. But now we've moved to getting more and more guests who've actually requested to be on, or people who have said, you ought to have this guest on. We've now moved to do more of them by Skype as well, so we can have some in-studio guests when possible, because no matter how good Skype is, it's still not quite as conversational as when you're sitting right next to someone in the studio. So we still want to have some people in the studio when we can, but we want to be able to make sure we can get national guests like Shep Hyken, one of the top speakers in the country, one of the top customer service experts, thought leaders in the country. His episodes were fantastic. This guy was just amazing. Priscilla McKinney, another fantastic one from Little Bird Marketing, just really high energy, great ideas. So we want to be able to have people like that. So we are going to expand the Skype, which number of Skype ones that are done, not just in studio. So we're able to pretty much have any guest that we want.
Well, it sounds exciting, and just another big step forward. So,
well, thanks for being on episode 1 and episode 200, Mike Mastovich, and really appreciate you being a part of the No BS Marketing Show, and from the beginning through 200 episodes.
All right. Thanks for having me on, and here's to the next 200. Take care.
Hey, No BSers. You know I love Laramore's men's and women's designer clothing. It's time for you to take your look to the next level. Laramore's is the place to make it happen for you. How do I know? Because they've helped me for years. You talk about combining professionalism and style. That's what happens when you go with Laramore's. You can shop online at laramores.com or in-store in downtown Pittsburgh. It's the No BS Marketing Show and a special episode, the 200th episode of the No BS Marketing Show.
Yeah.
And then with that 200th episode, we have all kinds of guests. You know, we have Mike Maz already call in, but now we have 2 of my all-time favorite people, Suzanne Mayer and Rhonda Bolding. Rhonda Bolding, Suzanne Mayer.
You're going to say that to every single guest that comes in the door, I bet. Oh, these are my favorite people.
I won't say that to Mike Gaddy and Paul Sandberg when they're on later. So a little bit of background. Suzanne Mayer and I have been through the trenches.
Yes.
20 years of working together. And you were involved with this show before it even started. Bounced the ideas off of you a good year before, and then you were the 3rd guest. Then you jumped in a pinch, and you were the producer for a ton of episodes, at least 50 episodes. And then there's Rhonda Bolding, met Rhonda Boulding when she heard me speak, and she wasn't offended or anything, and she actually wanted to bring me into Mascaro Construction.
Yes.
Friend of mine, John Mascaro. So when she said, I work at Mascaro Construction, I want to have you come over. I said, that's funny you said that. I've been telling John for years he needs to do real marketing.
I never knew that.
Yes.
I didn't know that's where
That's where
guys.
it all started.
So that's where we got our connection. You're going to have to be closer to the mic, Rhonda. But that's where we got our connection. So we worked together at Mascaro. And I wouldn't do this to John because I love John. So I wouldn't steal her from Mascaro.
That's right.
So I waited till she left. And then she reached out just to say, I'm doing this other thing on the side. I'm doing some consulting. I got my own consulting business. I'm not sure where I'm going. Just had a baby on the same day as Mike Gaddy's son.
I
Same
do
birthday,
remember
same
that.
exact day. And I said, well, why don't you come and talk? And then she came and helped Mass Solutions during a major growth period. Then she went over to Highmark and dazzled them.
Yes.
And now what's the latest
Good
endeavor?
time. So now I'm with Strata Architecture, which is really in my sweet spot. So my background is in construction and architecture. So the Highmark thing was a little shift for me. But now I'm back in my comfort zone. Strata is an amazing firm. It's a cross-functional design firm with landscape architects, interior designers, architects, and they're really helping to shape the Pittsburgh landscape as well as Philly. So it's an amazing team.
Yeah. Two true no BSers. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you.
So like you're both polite and not going to like jump in and stuff. You seem like you're waiting for me to.
I know.
So I'm just going to throw it out there. So your first thoughts when I told you we were going to do this show, and then after you heard the first couple episodes, and then now, what are your thoughts?
The first thought, just knowing your background in radio and your personality, it makes sense. How we were going to do it in the midst of all of the other things that we were trying to do, it was like, okay, this is crazy, but awesome at the same time. I remember the first episode. I think you were a little bit nervous about like who's going to listen to it. Yes. How do we push it? There was a big concern about Apple and the ratings. And I think we were thinking, because we're a marketing firm, we were thinking about the marketing like metrics of it all. Yeah. But really with your personality and drive, it's like you make it what it is. And now that I listen to your more recent episodes, you've relaxed and it's evolved organically into this amazing beast. It's almost like this is what you were meant to do. Wow. Not that you aren't amazing at everything else, but this is you. You were born for this.
Thank you, Rhonda.
I recall a couple of times where you were, I don't think I should do this anymore. But I remember saying to you, you love doing this. Yes. You love doing it. And I do think it has helped balance you. I think you're a better marketer. I think you're a better leader doing this as part of what you're doing.
I agree.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it filled a void that I didn't know I had. Because I had that radio for all those years, and there was a lot more speaking years ago. And then when I started leaning towards doing this, I hadn't been having that outlet for that creative juice. But you brought up something I forgot, and I'm glad you brought it up because I wouldn't have remembered to say this. When we first put the show out there, we didn't know any better, so we sent the show out as No Bullshit Marketing.
Yes.
And we got banned from iTunes. The death of a podcast. We did 2 episodes and got banned from iTunes. So we all went, what the hell are we going to do? And we were brainstorming and everything. And we already had like the ampersand and the hashtag or whatever. So we had a bunch of things, an exclamation point. And somebody said, well, let's just make it no B and then 8 or however many asterisks. We sent it back, and within a week, iTunes said, you're back live.
Yes.
How crazy is that? So then we had street cred because it put explicit lyrics. That's what they put on there. We were like 2 Live Crew.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
2
right.
Live Crew. That's it. Luther, baby. Yeah, so some crazy stuff. So, Suzanne, you also had the distinction of when I sat down, I made my list of guests. I went with my brother, Mike, for sentimental reasons and because he's a Hall of Fame sports writer as number 1. And then Jerry Zahorchak, the former Secretary of Education of the state of Pennsylvania, was number 2. Penciled in at number 3 was Suzanne Mayer.
Yeah, that's right.
And you were having a bad day, and you said, I'm not even going to do this.
Remember that? I think I was actually in tears earlier that day. And I I wasn't going to do it. I think it was in my home office.
Yeah, you was on Skype.
Yeah, because you were making fun because I had a day bed in the background. You're like, is that where you take your naps?
I thought you were like Thomas Jefferson. He was famous for having a bed when he read all the time.
We did do it. Was Skype, wasn't it?
Skype,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was funny because I remember once we got through the whole thing, I was like, Dave, I feel so much better now. Because it was just sort of this kind of a walk down memory lane of our professional relationship. And it was, I remember that very well.
I remember the day too. I felt so bad. You had just had a bad encounter and you were really emotional. And I just kept saying, just got it out because we'll end up laughing by the time it's over.
And we did. And we totally did.
And then you said a line that other guests told you when you were the producer. You said to me, that was like therapy.
Yeah.
Remember how many times we had people leave and say that?
So many times.
So many guests say this is like therapy.
Which is a huge compliment to you because it gets people thinking. You kind of approach business a different way and you make them think.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that was actually one of the things I remember when I came on board and was helping to produce. You were like in this podcast. And my point to him was like, dude, you have these people bearing their souls to you, like with their business problems. This is an opportunity. Mm-hmm. Let's get in there. Let's help these people, and that's when we kind of started bringing it, I feel like a little bit more full circle. We had this great platform where we were bringing these people in and, where there was opportunities, great. If there wasn't, that's fine too. But it all kind of like started to make sense. Mm-hmm. Like it all sort of came together. I remember.
You both also have some other ties that I want to talk about, 2 different episodes. So Kevin.
Yes.
Rhonda's husband, Kevin Bolding, the CEO of the Greater Pittsburgh YMCA, was so kind to me because he had just had the announcement. He let us announce it on the air. It was like a day or 2 after he found out when he was officially named president. Mm-hmm. I thought he was a fabulous guest. I remember
great.
I said to Suzanne, there was a couple times I started tearing up and I said, I'm like, he speaks so well. But what are your thoughts having heard from him being on the show?
At first, I didn't think he would agree to do it because Kevin, I'm a little more extroverted. Kevin's kind of in the box, and the title alone made him say, should I do this? And he asked me, he's like, what is Dave doing over there? Like, give me the inside scoop before I go on air, having just received this promotion and make a fool out of myself or brand myself in a way that I shouldn't be doing. And I said, it's a word, but it's all about just being real and genuine and approaching things in a way that's not so strict.
Yes.
So you represent yourself in the way that you will, but it's just under this whole marketing, no BS marketing umbrella. And he's like, okay, because he trusts me. He did it. And I thought it was so fantastic because although he's a little more introverted than you are, I think you played off of each other well.
Yes.
You were able to pull things out of him. And what I can say about Kevin is that he's very genuine in what he says and shares. And so your gift of being able to pull that out of him, I just thought it was a great dynamic.
I loved that episode. I'm telling you, I was emotional after that episode. I told Susan, I said, I just love that guy. Mm-hmm. He's just so good and good-hearted, and genuine's the right word.
Mm-hmm. Charlie Schleep stands out to me. Remember, he walked out and we were like, he's Yoda. he's like Yoda. He just was such a wise man that we were, I think, both sort of struck by him.
The thing about when I first talked to Charlie Schleeves and when I talked to John Mascaro, our mutual friend, John didn't want to do it. And he said something that many people have said. And they said, well, I don't do a lot of marketing. And I say the show from day one was about 2 things, leadership and communication.
Yeah.
And we had to convince Charlie that as well. As soon as Charlie got here, though, he talked about leadership and communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second thing that ties to you and is one of these things, and it's an OBS show, so I'm not going to pull any punches, is I felt that in our peak era, not that we're old now because we still do great creative work, but when you and I were really driving a lot of creative stuff at UPMC and Monongahela Valley Hospital and even some Duquesne University, there was a third person that was our trio. And I think we had a little bit of a chance for a reconnection with our man, Mark Falone.
Oh my gosh. I'm so touched you brought him up because that was amazing. Because actually, Mark, who's been a dear friend of mine for probably as long as
Yep.
as you. We actually had a falling out,
And I knew that.
and hadn't spoken in a couple of years. And you said, "Oh, Mark's coming on the show," and I thought, "Oh," and you actually brought us back together.
Oh,
and
that's so nice.
Yeah.
and yeah,
No, what I love about working with both of you is you guys bring out my creative juices a lot. And when Rhonda and I would do projects, I always loved how Rhonda would do little things like just she'd put a slide in that she didn't tell me it would be some cool image or some cool thing. And then right when I'd go to hit that slide at the client presentation, I'd smile, and then the client would always love that. So I want to touch on the beginning format of the show and hear both of you, because you both played a role in this. Do you remember when we started out, now we have a hit the bullseye rant that's about targeting, hit the bullseye targeting. And that's about, I write something about target marketing, segmentation, and positioning by segment. But do you remember at the beginning when hit the bullseye would put people on the spot and make people choose
Yes.
between,
Oh, yes.
and you'd have to choose between like,
Hit us with one.
I don't know, like U2 or REM. You'd have to choose there from the same.
U2.
So you
REM.
there, look at this. Look, REM. U2.
Hate you too.
Do you remember those? But people would get like nervous, and then we'd go, like,
Yeah.
you have to say real quick. But and we would pull out like something would be like choose your health care as if your life depended on it, or health for all. And then we'd just pick like something like MasterCard, priceless, Visa. What's theirs everywhere in the world or whatever.
But see, that's what you've kept the show very organic, and you've adapted content kind of based on, I think, gauging comfort level of
Yes.
guests and, what the takeaway was. So, yeah.
Well, the funniest thing that happened on the show and why I shifted gears on certain things, well, a couple of things Suzanne helped shift. Like the show wasn't moving at certain points.
Yeah,
So
the pacing. We tightened the pacing.
And you tightened the pacing up. And one of them was we both loved making people choose between those two ads, campaigns, or
like
two
that.
famous things. But it didn't work with everybody. Like it worked with Kevin because he said a joke or two throughout the way. But my buddy Mark Marmo would just go, blue, red, white. So like we had no talk, and I told him afterwards, I'm like, Mark, man, you gave me nothing. He was an early guest as well. So you had said, hey, this pacing
love
isn't
Mark
working.
Marmo.
You had said this pacing isn't working because some of your guests are uncomfortable with it. So I said, well, let's go and not abandon that term, because that hit the bullseye ties back to bullshit. So we just turned it into segmentation, which is a major piece of what we do. So we move around a little bit. We change a little bit.
Organic. It's fluid.
That's right.
That's
Yes.
the beauty of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Now, how about this one? The hardest question that frustrated me was, I guess this is pretty common for me. Like I give too much information, and I'm very, one of my favorite proverbs is an unguarded strength is a double weakness. So a strength of mine is that I'm very honest and open, but if I don't guard that, I can babble too much and say some things. So I also am very willing to say, like, this is something I'm weak at, and this is something I need to get better at, or that was my mistake. But I forgot that that's not the norm. So I had this one question that would say, tell me when you were a BSer.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would put people.
And these people, like at the beginning, would like just make shit up,
do
and
you
I'd
mean?
go, hold up, can we rewind that, Suzanne? We got to tape that over, because so few people were willing to actually put themselves out there.
It was definitely a vulnerability issue, and just like kind of like what Rhonda touched upon. I mean, your question, especially people like within corporations, like the comfort level with the name, they're already coming in feeling vulnerable, and then they're being put on the really being put on the spot. Yeah.
You know what's interesting is how over time it works, because I almost abandoned that question, but the last 10 guests or 15 guests or even 20 had heard some shows, and they came in ready to say it, and they were legit.
It's about the insight.
Yeah.
They were telling legitimate things that I was like, holy shit, they're actually telling us something. Like one guy told this whole story about how he was just too opinionated and too short with people, and he explained what was happening, and he explained what he did to work on it, and it was something like 8 years ago, so it wasn't like something like, last month I was a jerk, So you're seeing more and more of it now where they're more comfortable.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell based on their personalities what questions you might be able to get away with and which ones might put them in an uncomfortable position. And then you're quick on your feet, so you can shift gears once you notice that maybe you're not going to get what you need.
So let's, I'll go to Suzanne first to give you some time. Suzanne, you would know more. Who are some of your favorite guests? We already named a few of them. Excuse me, coughing.
Well, you mentioned Mark. Tony Lombardi.
Lombardi
I thought was
amazing.
great. He was prior to me, but I remember that was just another connection from our professional past. That
and Tony was one of my 4 mentors
lovely.
that I mentioned throughout the show, and he was at Monongahela Valley Hospital. And every time he sees me, he always hugs me and says he was too hard on me. And I said, "That's okay. I was pretty hard on you too." And it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that kind of was like sort of like a resolution.
Yeah,
you know. I mentioned I love Charlie Schlieb.
Schliebs.
I feel like I'm saying his name wrong.
No, you got it right.
I really enjoyed Chuck Canaris. I thought Chuck did a great job.
Talk about nervous when he came on. He kept saying to me, I know you, so I'm nervous.
Yeah.
And I said, that makes me feel really good. You think I'm a jerk. Okay.
He did a great job, though.
He was really good.
Yeah.
Good man.
Amy Veltri was hilarious.
That was a funny one.
Yeah, that got a little crazy at the end.
Yeah.
I asked her to come to today's. I said, you were the craziest guest. And she goes, I'm out of town. I would have came.
Yeah,
She's the first person to do 4 shots during the show.
Yeah.
And she weighs like 97 pounds.
Yeah.
Right.
And Eric Walker, who I heard he's going to be back on. I thought he was really good too.
He's on his way.
I'll get to see him. I hope.
Yes.
I hope. Those are the ones that stand out. And Kevin, I get like Kevin was the one where it was very emotional. Like he was so genuine and from the heart that he was inspiring. I think that was one that I walked away and was like, wow, I want to be like him.
He was inspiring. He's tall, handsome guy, comes in with that soft voice, has like a rhythm to it without trying to sound like a speaker. He's not sounding like he's an orator, but he is. And he's talking and you're going, whoa.
And just imagine that at home in real life. That is for real. Like we'll be having a conversation and he's just so like smooth and laid back and he'll say, well, Rhonda, tomorrow. And I'm sitting there like, can you just say it already? Like, but that's that's real life, Kevin. It's not for the show. It's not for work. It's just who he is, which is the beauty of who he is.
No BSer.
So no BSer.
Yeah.
He's the same all day, 24/7. So
I have to mention Denise Sansosti Troby as well.
Oh.
That was the one that made your toes curl. That was hilarious.
Uncomfortable. She tells me, I got a bunch of new guests for you. And I say, oh, great. And like one was Leah Lizarrando. Is it Leah or Leah?
Leah
Lizarrando of 412 Food Rescue. She was fabulous.
Oh, yeah.
She gets a couple other ones.
Lou Castelli
was
from
great.
Public Theater.
And the list of names, and I go, yeah, this makes sense. These guys are all pretty strong. And then I go, who's this one? And then you go and you tell me.
So Denise is, she's the regional director of Pure Romance. And she treats sex very much like a science. Okay. Like she's very scientific about it. But seeing this one in that, I mean, she was educating, and this one was just squirmed, and that was the most entertaining from a producer standpoint. It was highly entertaining to watch Dave just
as she told me that she said she would help me by giving me the book for Darlene and I Tickle My Pickle.
And she
did.
I
couldn't get that out of my head.
Right.
Tickle My
the
Pickle.
whole time you're thinking about that. Okay.
And then she was asking me probing questions, and I'm like, can we just talk about someone else? Let's not talk about me.
Hypotheticals?
Yeah.
Right.
It was very uncomfortable, Rhonda.
I can imagine.
Very uncomfortable.
Those are the ones that stand out in my mind.
Yeah.
So
this is one other one. So the mentor question came from after we had like 3 or 4 times. I just said, they keep bringing up someone that's a mentor. So you and I said, let's go and add that as a question. How about how that has led to when the people talk about their mentors, that you can tell they've thought about it, because we tell them in advance, this is some of the stuff we're going to talk about. And when they come in and they think about it, you see a couple of them got choked up as talking about their mentor or mentors. It's been pretty cool.
that's funny you mentioned that. I just last week had breakfast with my very first boss in my professional career, Terry Kaywood, who was the original voice from the Electric Lunch on WDVE.
Yeah.
Hadn't seen him in 20 years probably, and just had this wonderful thing. And we took a picture, and I put it out on LinkedIn, just, hey, my first boss. And I will tell you, I was like just so shocked at the response of, because I kind of came at it from a standpoint of mentorship and being a good boss. Like he was such a good boss and enabled me and whatnot. But I was so taken by the reaction on LinkedIn.
It was a nice post, and it wasn't your traditional like career type post, even though it was related as far as a mentor. And I know Terry, so hearing you talk about it, I immediately said, "Oh," because he hasn't been a mentor of mine, but I could see how he could have affected your life in that way. So for me, it just immediately tugged at my heartstrings. I think I read it 3 times, and I'm looking at the picture thinking, this is so nice. And you didn't have to do it. It wasn't mentor day or
no.
It was so genuine. And
I was
thoughtful.
so touched by just reconnecting with him, and it forced me to just remember where my career went. I mean, he really put me on a trajectory, and I think I had mentioned the thing. To this day, the skills that he taught me, to this day I use. So yeah, but that's just when you said mentorship. That's something that just popped in my mind.
Well, let's put Rhonda on the spot, since I've mentioned Tony Lombardi, George Hartnett, John Dame, some of my mentors.
Sure.
How about you?
So I never really had a true mentor, but when I think about some of the people who have affected my career over time, so it may not have been an established relationship, but there are people that I consider mentors. Like Cheryl Maybach was my first boss back in I don't know what year it was, but she was the chief marketing officer for Barton Mallow Construction in Southfield, Michigan, and was instrumental in me seeing more in myself she saw more in me than I saw in myself. So when an opportunity came available for me to relocate to Atlanta to accept a position to help manage their regional marketing initiatives, if it weren't for her mentorship, I would have said no. Like, there's no way I'm moving away from my family. There's no way I can handle marketing for a regional office. But sometimes people have to see things in you that you don't see in yourself to give you that push of encouragement to show you that you can do it. I don't think I'd be where I am today in my career if it wasn't for her believing in me and encouraging me to take that leap of faith and do something that I thought was bigger than what I'm capable of. So I think I've grown as a person. I think I've grown professionally in ways that I wouldn't have not moving away from home where I didn't know anyone, out of my comfort zone. So when I think about mentors, kind of in a non-traditional sense, she was one of those people that I listened to, I trusted. She was always offering words of wisdom, books that I should read, conferences that I should attend. Believe it or not, I used to be very shy. So getting involved in different networking opportunities and engaging with other people, meeting people outside of the brick and mortar of our actual office really helped to shape who I am today. So,
check out this quote from Esquire magazine. One of the country's leading specialty stores for selection and service. Don't leave Pittsburgh without your little black bag filled with beautiful fashions from the city's premier family-owned clothier for men and women. Experience the highest quality designer and private label collections, impeccable customer service, and custom tailoring that have been Laramore's hallmark for more than 75 years. Now that's an endorsement. Shop online at laramores.com or in-store downtown Pittsburgh. It's a special 200th episode of the No Bullshit Marketing Show. Of course, I'm Dave Mastovich. We have Rhonda Bolding and Suzanne Mayer, and we're about to close out with any last words of wisdom, thoughts, ideas, suggestions, memories of the past 200 shows and beyond.
I think keep doing what you're doing. It works. It's no BS marketing. So when you think about what you used to do, some of the questions you used to ask, just keep letting it evolve organically, because when you look at that first episode and you look at your 199th episode, they're all awesome, but they've evolved in their own way. And so it's a show that you can listen to 10 episodes or you can listen to 199 episodes, but you feel like you're getting something new every time. It's not, oh, I know what I'm going to get when I turn on this show. You know the premise, but there's always going to be something interesting and new. So I think that's awesome when you think about moving forward.
2 stories before we cut to Suzanne. So I'm walking through the city the other day, and one of the key marketing people at a client of mine had his buds in and was walking, and I gave him the head nod. He pulls out. He goes, listen. And I was on. And he goes, I'm up to episode 160.
That's
so he had
awesome.
been listening for Then the second story is Henry Nadd, who we all know from Vistage Group. Henry's a quirky, crazy, lovable guy. For some reason, he hadn't listened at all. And then around episode like 140, he started listening. So 2 weeks after the first, he says, I just listened to the first episode of yours I've listened to. And I said, great, we're at 141. So I'm teasing him. About 2 weeks go by and he goes, yeah, I can be a little bit crazy. He said, and so I just binge listened. He goes, I just listened to number 1. He goes, I went backwards. So over a 2 week period, he listened to 100.
That's so
he's listened to all 188.
That's so him. I love that.
Awesome.
I love that.
Henry Nadd.
Oh, wow.
What's your last words, Susan?
My last words are how far you've come from a technology standpoint, from a visual standpoint. I'm like looking at these screens that are new since I was here. They're awesome. I think you are on the threshold of a video component of this. I know you've talked about it, but I feel like that's kind of like the next natural step.
I know you have to help us make that happen. Because, I'll wear a mask, but the guest will be good on. Yeah. See, if I had video, you could see this cool ass shirt I have on.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that shirt.
Yeah. Go ahead. Describe it. I'll stand up.
Right. He has Muhammad Ali on the back of his shirt.
If you even dream of beating me, you better wake up and apologize.
And Tom knew exactly what that was. What's the brand?
Robert Graham.
Okay. That means nothing to me.
Well, we're brought to you by Laramore's, And so since I've been a big Laramore's guy for longer than I'd like to admit.
We love Laramore's.
Yeah. And so probably about 5-6 years ago, I saw these shirts. And they weren't the same as the guy on Modern Family, but they were a little bit better. They had the collars and the cuffs that were different. So I started wearing Robert Graham's. And I just would wear them, and then all of a sudden it became almost like, without even trying, it became this thing that people would say, like, well, those shirts Dave wears, the shirts you wear. So then when I started the show, I had Tom Michael on from Laramore's, and he said
he'd be the man that comes in and visits you. Who's the
That's Roy, who works for Tom.
Okay, all right.
Tom's the owner, so he became a sponsor.
That's
so
great.
I wear a Robert Graham on every show. But the story behind this shirt is, when I bought it, the guy said, "Hey, you can't wear this very often." He said, because it's like in your face.
Yes.
I was a big Ali fan growing up. I loved Muhammad Ali when I was a little kid. And I just can remember the fights because my dad would often be on the fence. He sort of liked him, but he didn't. But I loved him. And so just following Ali. And I watched him go from that where he was hated when I was 10. And then he was sort of okay. And then at the Olympics was the turning point when he lit the flame. And then the last 20 years, he's been revered. So this guy says, you can't wear it very often. So when I saw it, it was right around the time when Brev's senior night for basketball was coming. So I knew there was the event at the gym where they'd announce you and bring the parents down. And then afterwards was a party. Well, mind you, I've coached Brevon's team in AAU and in travel basketball from 3rd grade through 11th grade. And I had coached Alex's team. So almost everybody from 2 grades above Brev down to 2 grades below knows of me as a coach. Now I'm coaching Carter's team, which is 5 years below Brev. So basically, almost everybody, boy in that Bethel Park School District knew of me as a coach. So I come into the game with the leather jacket on. You don't see this because in front it's just white. And they call us down for halftime. And I walk down with Darlene, and there's 4 players that are seniors. And the other 3 all mentioned me when the announcer reads their favorite basketball, what they said, playing for Coach Mastovich and Coach Gilmore in travel basketball and Mass Solutions and stuff, which was really heartfelt. It was great of those 3 guys to do that. So they call me, and I take the leather jacket off and I go walking down the court, and you could hear my 4th grade team or 5th grade team at the time go, "Whoa, look at Coach!" Woo. I could hear them pointing up at them.
Nice.
And then Alec and his crew all came back for that, and they're up there pointing at me. So it's only the 3rd time I wore it.
It's pretty awesome.
Yes,
It's unique.
Awesome. It's pretty you.
Thank you. It's the No BS Marketing Show, and thank you both for being here.
My pleasure.
Right on. Congratulations.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show, brought to you by Laramore's Men's and Women's Designer Clothing. Free shipping, free returns. Shop men's and women's designer clothing, shoes, accessories, jewelry, and more online at laramores.com or in-store downtown Pittsburgh. Visit masssolutions.biz for show notes plus additional marketing and messaging resources. Are you signed up for the No BS Marketing Weekly Update? You'll receive timely, valuable ideas to improve your marketing and transform your message. It's light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. To sign up, masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.